Welcome to those in Second Life and on the web to the third in a series of conversations hosted by the Institute for Network Culture at the University of Southern California and Global Kids. I am Connie Yowell, Director of Education at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. Our topic today is Reflections on Philanthropy in Virtual Worlds. To find information on this event or to see its archive, please go to MacArthur's Spotlight blog at spotlight.macfound.org. Here you will also find the machinima tour of the island led by Jonathan Fanton. Let me introduce Jonathan Fanton. He is the president of the MacArthur Foundation. Prior to coming to the foundation in 1999, he was president of the New School for Social Research in New York City for 17 years. He also served the chair of Human Rights Watch, the largest U.S.-based human rights organization, which operates in 70 countries. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Jonathan for his extraordinary and innovative leadership of the foundation. It has been under Jonathan's leadership and guidance that the work in digital media and learning was launched and has grown. He has guided our exploration in virtual worlds and led a true integration of technology across the foundation. Without further ado, Jonathan Fanton.
Thank you, Connie, for those generous remarks, and welcome everybody. Really glad to have you with us. For more than a year, MacArthur's been exploring philanthropy and virtual worlds, whether or not this platform can be put to good use in pursuit of the public good. And so it's very fitting that my guest today is Cory Ondrejka, because Cory is one of the first who introduced me to virtual worlds when MacArthur was beginning its exploration of digital media and learning. Virtual worlds and digital media and learning more generally are part of MacArthur's embrace of technology across all our fields of interest, both in the U.S. and in 60 countries around the world where we work. Here are some examples. Using software developed by Benetech, individuals can confidentially report human rights violations without fear of detection or reprisal. We also supported in India the development of a sexuality education curriculum for young women that they can access privately on their cell phones. And a consortium of museums, including the Smithsonian Museum and the Field Museum here in Chicago, has created the very ambitious Encyclopedia of Life, a web resource which will have information on all 1.8 million known species on Earth. And we hope that both experts and citizen scientists will help provide new information about some of the millions of species yet to be identified. Our most comprehensive exploration and use of technology is our work in digital media and learning. At the core is the notion that digital media use is changing how young people think, learn, make judgments, socialize, and engage in civic life. And if that assumption is true, what are the implications for learning environments and for institutions, the schools, libraries, museums, charged with preparing young people for a productive future in an increasingly complex and connected world? Do digital media change the central role of schools now that learning is possible anytime, anywhere? Our exploration of virtual worlds is part of this effort, and the past year and a half has included terrific conversations in Second Life with Linden Lab co-founder and CEO Philip Rosedale, and later with Yale professor Jack Balkin on the topic of rights and responsibilities in virtual worlds and social networks. New York-based Global Kids created the International Justice Center in Second Life and simulcast UN Secretary General Kofi Annan's acceptance speech on the occasion of his award of the first MacArthur Award for International Justice. USC has held a community challenge to identify projects that promote public good in the virtual and physical worlds. Winning proposals were each awarded $100,000 Linden dollars and a plot of land in Second Life to build their projects. One of the projects, for example, was Virtual Ability Island, which provides supportive environments for people with a wide range of disabilities so that they can thrive in virtual worlds like Second Life. Global Kids has worked with the Field Museum here in Chicago on I Dig Tanzania, a project in Teen Second Life to engage young people in paleontology. And ResEd is a social network of academics, practitioners, bloggers, parents, and nonprofit staff members interested in exploiting virtual worlds for learning purposes. It is active in-world also with events and podcasts. Now, the capstone of all this activity is the development of the MacArthur Island in Second Life. The island is a way to learn about the MacArthur Foundation, our grantees, and philanthropy in general. We want it to be a place where organizations we support, foundation colleagues, and the general public can learn about and use what a virtual world has to offer to achieve their own goals. For a quick tour of the island, I've just released a short machinima video where I give a walking, and also a flying tour of the exhibits. It's available on YouTube or here on the island. Now let's turn to the highlight of the session. My guest, Cory Ondrejka, is Senior Vice President in Music's digital business. He is responsible for building a digital strategy for this giant in the music industry. And before that, Cory was co-founder of Second Life, and his eclectic background includes graduation from the Naval Academy with a degree in weapons systems engineering and computer science. So let me kick off this conversation with a question, and he and I will go back and forth, and then we'll open up in a bit to questions. Now, Cory, it's been a while since you were last officially in Second Life, so we welcome you back. How does it feel to step back into a world that you did so much to engineer and enable?
Well, first of all, Jonathan, thank you very much, and thank you to the MacArthur Foundation for having a chance to be here. It has been a while since I've been back in Second Life, and let me tell you, it's awfully exciting to be back and be in a space seeing this many avatars from, I am sure, all over the world. And I don't get back into Second Life very often at this point. So when I got this invitation, it was I was completely jazzed by the chance to get to pop back in. I realized that unfortunately my avatar was probably out of fashion by this point, but sadly I didn't have time to go shopping too much before the event. So good old Cyan Cat will once again be my avatar. But it's always interesting when you spend 6 or 7 years of your life working on one thing to then be a little bit farther away for it from a while. And it has been really exciting, especially over the last 3 to 6 months, watching Second Life really kick it back into gear and watching an incredible array of interesting projects appearing in Second Life. It seems every day I see something on New World Notes or elsewhere that talks about something pretty amazing going on. So, the chance to pop back in and see what MacArthur's doing here now is very exciting to me.
As you look back on Second Life, but the state of virtual worlds more generally, what surprised you? What's different from what you would have predicted 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Well, I think that I certainly wouldn't, if we go back 3 years, I wouldn't have predicted 2008, which saw this really interesting mix of, Second Life certainly hitting the bottom of the hype cycle, so to speak, and probably being, to a certain degree, unfairly slagged on during that period. We saw Google come out with Lively and, produce yet another in a long range of projects that was to be, the Second Life killer or the much better virtual world. And, obviously building these things is perhaps harder than it looks. And I think that, in some ways it's kind of sad that Google didn't give it a long enough chance to really see if Lively was going to take off or at least find, carve out a niche of its own. In the meantime, we've also seen an emergence of some very interesting, more game-focused virtual worlds, but those that are still keying off of some of the core ideas of Second Life, user creation, giving the residents of the space a great deal of freedom. I think as MetaPlace comes out of private alpha into public beta, We're seeing some really cool stuff going on between concerts that have been bridging between virtual worlds, and people exploring a whole different set of creative opportunities within MetaPlace. And so I think that, as in all things when we predict the future, sometimes things go more slowly than you'd expect. And I think that we're still very much in an early stage, and certainly we're still in an early stage of figuring out how to integrate virtual worlds into how we use the web. That obviously is more than just running inside web browsers, but it's integrating 3D and 3D collaboration into how we access the vast trove of information that's on the web. And I think, more broadly, we're certainly still seeing the effects of the challenges of bringing people into virtual worlds where, my experience when I was teaching down at Annenberg and my poor students, got to go into Second Life, because one of the joys of being a professor is you get to tell your students to go into Second Life. And it was really interesting because what we tended to see there, as I fall asleep showing off that I'm now a total noob using Second Life, the reality of that first visit into Second Life is still potentially confusing, potentially hard to use, potentially kind of unusual and scary. But on the other hand, if people stick with it, they then find things that are, to them, amazing. And so crossing that chasm, I think, is still the biggest challenge waiting out there. And whoever really hits that one is going to be is going to really take off. And I think certainly Linden has as much of a chance as anybody. They have a phenomenal team, and more importantly, they have the group of residents like those around us who just do amazing things every day.
And there was a movement of business into virtual worlds that started up, and then it seemed to slow down. What happened, and what do you think is the future of virtual worlds for commercial use?
So I think, like anything reported on, and certainly anything reported on the web, the rise and fall is probably somewhat amplified, where, the peak was probably never quite as big as the peak seemed, and I doubt the trough was anywhere near as low as the trough was portrayed. I think instead, much like the web, we went through a period of exploration of what virtual worlds mean if you're a business, right? And so much like early web days, if you just put up a relatively non-interactive advertising portal, that's probably not going to drive a lot of excitement and long-term engagement from the people you're trying to reach. On the other hand, as we just saw in a white paper by IBM, Second Life has some amazing capabilities around distributed meetings, distributed training, and especially in these days, offsetting travel. And so, but that's not the first thing that a business would think about when they look at virtual worlds. The first thought is, how do we do advertising there? Or maybe if you think about it a little bit, how do we do testing? And so I think that much like we saw, in a lot of ways, a decade before businesses were really being able to take advantage of the web, I don't think it's much of a surprise that it's taken a while for businesses to wrap their heads around Second Life. But I think the big advantage has been that when businesses have engaged with Second Life, it's almost always begun in a very grassroots way. And certainly IBM's involvement was a delightful example of this, where a few of their employees just started using Second Life for meetings and then shared it within the company. And so it was this viral engagement as opposed to some mandated, you will go use Second Life. And so I think that we're going to see more of that. We'll see more of that across other virtual worlds, just like we're seeing that across gaming and the web.
Moving from the commercial to the not-for-profit world, does the collapsing geography that you've described in a recent article affect nonprofits who are trying to make a difference in virtual worlds?
Well, I hope so. The idea behind that turn of phrase, which came out of a conversation with Yochai Benkler, actually, was this idea that as we get more engagement through virtual worlds and more of the kinds of engagements you can get in virtual worlds, these very real feeling, these very, not just real feeling, but very real face-to-face, interactive, collaborative interactions, that we open up an opportunity to engage in ways that previously we had to physically bring people together to do. And so instead, here is this chance to say, well, sure, it's only 30% as good as real life or 40% as good as real life, but it's still quite a bit better than any technology we had before. And so what can we do with that? And that combines with the reality that so much of Second Life's population is international, and so much of Second Life's population is ready to engage and ready to try to do interesting things. So I think what you have for nonprofits is this opportunity to reach an incredibly engaged community, many of whom really are interested in making a difference, and being able to reach them in a way that's far more cost effective than would have been in the physical world, and allows them more freedom of opportunity and freedom of action than they would have had in the real world. So I think almost certainly we will see much like businesses, I think we'll see more engagement going forward. And I think one of the surprising things, perhaps, although not as surprising in hindsight, is that nonprofits and educators have really led the way on innovative uses of virtual worlds. And I'm not sure what exactly the dynamic is that has enabled that, but we've certainly seen, an amazing variety of activities, across the many educational institutions that use Second Life, and across the many nonprofits who figured out how to use it in interesting ways.
Let me ask you a more technical question before you toss a couple questions my way. MacArthur supported MIT professor Henry Jenkins, who has written about the importance of convergence in the modern day media landscape, where individuals can now engage a single passion, multiple formats and modes, from video to print, even to radio. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think about the future of convergence for virtual worlds, especially how virtual worlds might grow to intersect with social networking websites, mobile media, or the 3D web? And from the perspective of your current job, what about music in virtual worlds?
Well, certainly, Henry has changed in a lot of people's thinkings about what convergence means and what happens when communities are able to bridge multimedia forms and bring ideas across many different forms of communication. I think that what makes virtual worlds so exciting is that they end up being the superset in many ways of all other communication forms, right? You can more or less take any conventional form of communication that you are using in other spaces and use it in virtual worlds. And again, it's not going to be as good as the real world, but it certainly will be better than not having it at all. And so I think what will get interesting is how we see more and more groups and communities within virtual worlds using the capabilities of virtual worlds, the ability to make interactive experiences, the ability to really generate place, right? This ability to generate something that feels and acts so real when you go there, to share their ideas, to share their cultures, and to really make that part of the process of literally building culture. And so I think there is no better example of that than music. And frankly, the experience of watching music emerge in Second Life led directly to my decision to go to EMI. Music became this killer application within Second Life years ago. And to a degree now that, last time I checked, there are 40 or 50 live music events a day in Second Life. And there aren't many cities in the world you could go to with that many live music events. And, I think the question there is why. And I'm certainly not smart enough to know exactly what the drivers there are. But I think it's a mix of the sense of place when going to listen to music in Second Life, the sense of the audience, right? When you're listening to just a webcast, you don't have that sense of other people being there with you. And, the variety that's out there and the ability. So apparently it's hundreds a day now of music events. So see, you leave for a year and things change. Who knew? But, that's just an incredible thing, because I think, hundreds a day, finding that in a real world city would be extremely difficult. And more importantly, being able to find hundreds from all over the world and all over the world, where after the show you can engage with the musician. I mean, that's just an amazing opportunity. And when we look at how music is being engaged with worldwide today, while certainly there's a lot of talk about the decline of CD sales, overall engagement with music is larger than ever before. People are spending more time engaging with music than at any other point in history, and engaging in a more interactive way and a broader, more international way than ever before. And so I think with virtual worlds, that was a perfect fit. And I expect that we're going to just see that continue, and have certainly had. It's been interesting to be at EMI and have something filter up to me, which was an artist asking about this thing called Second Life, and does anybody at EMI know anything about it? So, in some ways, that was serendipitous timing.
What do you miss most about not being at Second Life now?
What do I miss most? Well, when you spend 7 years building something, and you hire a lot of the people, at the end of the day, you just miss the people you're working with every day. And I think Linden has had and continues to have a strikingly interesting group of people. I think that it is a fun set of technical challenges, although part of the excitement of the last year at EMI is that it turns out there are no shortage of interesting technical challenges out there. So, but I think, ironically, the thing I probably miss the most is being able to do remote meetings in Second Life. Because let me tell you, once you're forced back to teleconferencing and video conferencing, you really, really miss being able to do meetings in Second Life.
Maybe you have a question or two for me.
I do, actually. I think, it's especially appropriate given, here we are opening this MacArthur space. And given, MacArthur having been, during your tenure, really gone from first starting to learn about these spaces and games and other forms of interactive media, and now today really being experts on this. I'm really curious, wearing your MacArthur hat, when you encounter folks who've just never heard of these places, who say, what do you mean you're having a meeting with a giant, blue glowing cat? How do you go about explaining, what these places are and why you're in them?
Well, I explain that there is a vibrant community in virtual worlds, in Second Life, and MacArthur, which seeks to build a more just, humane, and peaceful world, wants to help mobilize as many people as we can to work on the issues we care about: biodiversity conservation, population and reproductive health, human rights, international peace, and security. We find virtual worlds a very good way of reaching people all over the world who want to get involved. And that's why we have run a competition and awarded some grants to organizations like Virtual Ability or the American Cancer Society or Wall Jumpers, organizations that are bringing people together, are venues for serious conversation, and are able to form coalitions that move into the physical world to try to make things better.
So do you think that MacArthur moving in has had a significant impact on other foundations? I think, certainly from an external perspective, MacArthur Foundation carries, enormous prestige, enormous name value. Did you consider that as MacArthur moved in, and do you expect to see other foundations really following your lead at this point?
Well, we welcome other foundations joining us in Second Life, and I know my friend Alberto Ibargüen of the Knight Foundation is following our journey very carefully, and he's an imaginative and great leader of an important foundation, which is on the cutting edge of using new media for good purposes. So I think there will be other foundations that come along. There was a I'm retiring from MacArthur in June, and there was a meeting of all the large foundation presidents, and there was a toast to me, which was more to my avatar than to me. So clearly, there's high visibility among the major foundations about what we're up to.
Do you think that investments in digital media in general, and certainly virtual worlds in particular, have been impacted by the current economic climate? Do you see it as a more or less cost-effective option, or do you see it really sort of unrelated to the background economy at this point?
Well, let me say a word about MacArthur. We, like all other major endowments, have suffered in the recent recession, but our trustees have been clear that we're going to maintain our grant making at the height of the recession this year and next. And if we need to, things don't come back, we'll begin to ramp down a little bit starting in 2011. But let's hope things get better before then, and that won't be necessary. Even if we have to ramp down, we're going to protect our core fields, and we consider digital media and learning one of the most important pieces of work that we are doing, and so it will be absolutely protected during this downturn.
So I think I had one other that does flow out of that a bit. Well, actually, no. First, I have to ask a question that I really wanted to ask. So you mentioned your retirement from MacArthur in this summer. What's next for you? Because I have to imagine that after the breadth of change and really amazing things that you would have seen during your tenure at MacArthur, it must be interesting to be thinking about what's next.
Well, of course, I'm hard at work at what is, and haven't given a lot of thought to what's next, except to know that my wife and I will be on sabbatical for the balance of this calendar year at our home in Connecticut. After that, I would look forward to getting back into the workplace full-time, perhaps with a smaller special purpose foundation, or working for an NGO in the international sphere in human rights or in humanitarian assistance. One of the most satisfying activities I've had outside of my jobs has been my work with Human Rights Watch, which is a fantastic organization. So I don't expect there'll be any dearth of interesting opportunities, both for jobs and also serving on boards, which I've not been able to do because of conflicts of interest while I've been at MacArthur. And if I were to answer the same question I asked you, what will I miss about MacArthur? I give the same answer you did. I will miss the extraordinary staff that we have here, and I'm looking at my colleagues Connie Yowell and Julia Stash and Craig Wacker and Ben Stokes, who've all been so critical to launching the MacArthur Island and developing our signature program in digital media and learning.
Yeah, and I can certainly speak to having met them. I actually can't even remember how many years ago now. If I remember correctly, it was a National Academies discussion where we had some of the first discussions about is there a way to have a conversation going forward, and it's been an amazing experience to be on the outside watching the MacArthur Foundation come up to speed on a topic. So it's been very exciting to be part of that.
Good. If I might, just before we open it up to the audience, ask you one last question, and you may have another one for me. As you know, we're exploring how the use of digital media might change civic engagement and affect democratic processes in our country and beyond. How do you think about that challenge? Will the conversations that go on in virtual worlds, the organizations that form in virtual worlds, will those invigorate our democracy, or are they likely to encourage participants to carry over these passions and interests into the physical world?
Well, yeah, it's so interesting because, of course, transference is one of the dirtiest words in education theory and research, and in some ways, that's kind of the heart of that question. When we look back now 9 years ago, when the early Linden team and Philip and I were really having the first discussions of where some early tech demos were going to go. The question we struggled with the most was of course one of, can you really rely on user-generated content? We didn't even have a name for it at that point, but can you rely on people to come in and create the space? And what was so striking about it is that if you built a list of the really hard challenges around interactive content, you'd look at art creation, content creation, programming. These are things where whenever you're building video games, certainly, or any other interactive content, this is what you never have enough people to work on, because these are hard tasks. The set of people who, in theory, can do them is very limited. And so that was scary, and that was certainly when we talked to non-Linden employees. There'd sort of be a fair amount of laughter, because of course this was before Wikipedia, this was before YouTube, before Flickr, and so there weren't these great canonical Web 2.0 blah blah examples of user-generated content just winning. And so, but of course what we saw was, the majority of people who come into Second Life, the vast majority, will create content, will create artwork. Last time I knew the numbers, it was like 10 to 15% would write code. Right? When I talk to computer science professors and give that number, their jaws just drop. Because of course, in theory, coding's hard. And so I think in a very similar way, the more communities and groups within Second Life are built around bringing real-world challenges into Second Life, and the more we see connections between those groups, and we've seen that around fundraising, we've seen that around community organizing, we've seen that around a great deal of bringing public and civic engagement challenges into Second Life, and not by Linden, right? It's just been by communities bringing it in. So I think that the more tools and the more opportunity you give people to carry problems they care about into online, into virtual worlds, and the more the capabilities and affordances of those virtual spaces allow those communities to engage and take action, I think the more we're going to see. And so I think certainly, here we are, 6 months or 8 months after a historic election, an election very much keyed off of more engagement, more understanding of getting people excited about how important they are to the future of their country. And I think that technology is sitting in a great place to build off of that excitement. I think the challenge is going to be probably on government side. All right, governments are not well positioned to handle technologies like virtual worlds like Second Life. And so there's a learning process. How do you bring along government institutions to be able to be as agile and as engaged when, a lot of times if you're the United States government, what you put on a blog changes markets that day. Right. So how do you bridge that disparity in power to allow real engagement in virtual worlds? And I think that's going to be an enormous challenge. But I am excited by some of the people working on those challenges, and I think Second Life will be a part of it.
I was visiting with some of our Chicago friends in the White House a couple weeks ago, and was very impressed with the Obama administration's determination to use technology to reach out and engage all of us in improving the way our government works, and its genuine openness to points of view directly from citizens, unmediated through the Congress and all the rest. So if there ever is to be an administration in our country that is open to using technology to reinvigorate and strengthen our democracy, I think it's the Obama administration. We have a very large audience here, and I think we should turn it back to Connie Owl now to pose some questions from the audience. And if there's time left at the very end, you and I might exchange another question or two. But let's, Connie, take it away.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks, Cory. You both provided us with a thoughtful discussion and given us a lot to think about. I'm going to turn to the first question from Draxter Dupree, and I want to ask it of both Cory and Jonathan, because you've both been very involved in thinking about institutional and cultural change, and I think that's part of what this question gets at. So I'd love to hear both of you to respond to it. And he says, I encounter a deep fear of virtual environments within my circle of friends, i.e. the matrix will kill us all. Where I live in rural California, many nonprofits I talk to have no clue and seem to have no interest either to change their models. What needs to happen to engage people who could really benefit from these platforms? If you could say, just, Cory, you sort of started talking about this in terms of democracy and the government using virtual worlds, but say a little bit more, both of you, if you could, about the how of that in terms of engaging institutions and change.
Sure. So I think that there's sort of parallel challenges here. I mean, the first one is, as I think everybody sitting in this audience is probably painfully aware, Second Life has significant technological requirements. And so there's certainly still a disparity of broadband access, a disparity of high-end computer access. And if you are thinking about how to apply Second Life to some of those challenges, it would behoove you to understand who you're trying to engage with, so that you aren't in a position of trying to, cross a technological gulf. So that's sort of a separate piece of the problem. If that isn't what's holding you back, I think then you have the challenge of certainly perceptually, are virtual worlds serious places? Are they worth using? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there, what MacArthur has done allows you to cite, hey, MacArthur's doing it. I think that there are tens, hundreds, thousands of examples of fantastic public engagement, civic engagement that has happened in Second Life that I think you can point to, ranging from Katrina to NASA. You name it. There's been a great project. I hope that the documentation of those projects I hope you can find links to a lot of those eventually on the MacArthur space and elsewhere in Second Life, because and certainly the Science Islands are another great resource, assuming they still are. They were the last time I was in Second Life. So I think it's when you are trying to bring people into something new, being able to demonstrate paths, especially for somebody who may be worried that if they bring it to their superiors, they're going to get yelled at or fired, right? And so it's important to be able to provide a safe path in that says, no, this is serious stuff, and you can really change things for the better.
MacArthur supports about 1,000 organizations all over the world, from Rwanda to Nigeria to Peru to the Arctic to the Antarctic, Papua New Guinea, Madagascar, and lots of places in between. We are encouraging all of our grantees to use technology of all kinds to pursue their missions. And in fact, we've set a fund aside where program officers here can top up a regular grant with extra money for an organization to use technology. And just last week, we had a convening at Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, of human rights grantees, a kind of workshop on how to use technology, including virtual worlds. So I think MacArthur can, not only through its reputational value, but also through its philanthropy, be encouraging organizations and enabling them in places where it's hard to get good technology. We can help strengthen their access to technology.
Jonathan, as a university president, you were involved in designing a number of buildings. How is that similar to designing an island? This is a question from Chicago.
Well, that's a good question. And I did play a role in the design of our island, and I'm quite proud of it. I think a great building or a great island starts with a talented designer, but also with an engaged client. I believe in artistic freedom. I believe in following the purpose and the direction of an architect or a designer, but I also believe in asking questions and making suggestions. And this was a very comfortable process back and forth, and I think we got a better product because we were engaged.
This is for you, Cory. Are you or do you plan to bring Second Life or Second Life type virtual world technologies to your new position? Curious whether you see an opportunity to integrate a mainline business with virtual worlds. That comes from New York.
So, I mean, certainly, if I remember correctly, actually, EMI was in Second Life long before I joined EMI. And so, again, I think a lot of the most successful engagements between Second Life and business have been when it's been bottoms up, when it's been viral. That being said, certainly with the level of music engagement within Second Life and the level of interest we get from artists, that certainly there are interesting opportunities there. I think that the opportunity for EMI online and digital is really ultimately much broader than just Second Life. But I think it would not surprise me for virtual worlds to be a piece of that going forward.
This is also from Chicago. How can those of us in education and philanthropy help accelerate the adoption of the 21st century skills framework and foster among teachers a more sophisticated use of technology for instruction?
I think you should answer that, Connie.
Yeah, well played.
I'd be happy to answer that, Jonathan. I think that in looking at some of the work that we've supported through Global Kids, through Yville, and some of the other work, that there's an extraordinary opportunity rather than push skills at young people. What virtual worlds enable is the opportunity for young people to participate, to produce, and to join and engage in group activity. And so part of what's so engaging about virtual worlds is the opportunity for young people to do things that they may or may not be able to do in the physical world. I Dig Tanzania, which Global Kids ran this summer with the Field Museum here in Chicago, is a wonderful example where young people were able to participate in a virtual archaeological dig with real archaeologists who are actually implementing the dig in Tanzania. And so I think unbeknownst to the young people, they were developing extraordinary 21st century skills while participating in something that they were having a great time doing. And so I think virtual worlds, it's about the design of the activity and the engagement of young people, and through that, the development of skills along the way. So thank you for that question, and I'll move on to the next one. So here's a core question, both to Jonathan and to Cory. How can virtual worlds like Second Life increase linkage to the real world? How can we as nonprofits and educators build projects that promote cross-virtual world, physical world interaction?
Well, I was taking a tour of the nonprofit commons earlier today. There are 100 organizations that meet there, and I think there's a meeting every Friday, and it's an opportunity for those of you who have an interest in a particular topic, whether it's the environment or disabilities or children's rights or international justice, to talk with organizations in the physical world that are actually doing things on the front line. And it's an opportunity to volunteer or to give financial support. So I think there's a great opportunity here for Second Life and other virtual worlds to make these connections.
Well, and I think that certainly what makes Second Life unique in trying to answer that question is that because it has such a large an engaged population already, I think there is an opportunity, rather than having to start from scratch on some of these challenges, to look at groups that are already trying to make a difference. And so it seems to me, at least, that it is somewhat easier to build on the existing than to create from nothing. And so if you have a topic of interest, right? Find out where they're already meeting in Second Life. Find out where there's already a group raising money, raising awareness, building education content, because it's probably going on. And that also means that you're able to engage immediately with some of the people who will become the evangelists for what you're trying to raise awareness of. So these are the people who will be spreading the information online or talking to others or, connecting you to your first group of new members of the community you're trying to bring in.
And when you're finished with this session, take a tour of the MacArthur Island, and you will see what we're doing in conservation and affordable housing and community development and human rights. And there will be ways of connecting to our staff and to the foundation so we can help guide you to organizations in your locale that might be interested in having your help as a volunteer or even as a paid worker.
Well, and that's, I think, an excellent point because, again, one of the capabilities of virtual worlds that makes them so different is that rather than just going to a website for an organization, when you are in, the space holding the meeting on a civil rights issue in Second Life, you're very likely to find the people actually running it there. And so if you're trying to build out a similar effort, who better to talk to than folks who have already engaged with those challenges, who have already figured out how to talk to local governments or raise money or do whatever it is that you don't yet know how to do. And I think that ability to bootstrap in Second Life and to bootstrap your knowledge is incredible. And I think, certainly is one of the nice outcomes of MacArthur Island within Second Life is where else you can have a chance to randomly bump into MacArthur staff members and ask them how they've attacked these problems.
I also think it's an opportunity through the MacArthur Island to learn about other parts of the world. I gave a talk the other day to a group of young people, and I was asked what would I do over again. And I said what I would do over again is travel outside the U.S. Earlier and get engaged in international issues earlier. MacArthur is one of the great international global foundations, can really help.
And I want to, Cory, this is probably for you, from the University of Minnesota. Mobile devices are more common than desktops, and there are efforts to expand reach through programs that are there efforts to expand reach through programs that utilize virtual worlds on mobile devices? And if that connects also to a conversation about the developing world and virtual worlds, it would be great to hear a little bit about that.
Wow, so that would probably have been a better question to ask me 18 months ago. So I actually don't know the answer to that question particularly. I think that with the emergence of many virtual worlds trying to take advantage of the web and more mobile devices running the web natively, I think that, first of all, we will see more and more web-based communities that will just work on phones. Now, certainly they won't just work easily because cell phones have a different set of capabilities around screen size, power, connectivity, etc. But to first order, we're very rapidly approaching a point where nearly everyone has a device in their pocket that can get to the web and render most of the web. So I think that's sort of one direction. I think a second direction is that whether you're talking Second Life or other virtual worlds, the desire to integrate more tightly with the web means that your mobile device will have more and more ways to interact with what's going on in virtual worlds, even if it isn't the same interface, which of course makes sense because there's no reason why a cell phone should have the same interface into a virtual world than you'd see on a desktop. And in fact, probably trying to make it the same interface is a mistake. If that continues to happen, where we see more and more virtual worlds and communities running on mobile devices, I think the advantage for nonprofits, for people trying to reach into areas that have lower PC penetration or lower broadband penetration, is that phones give you a great infection vector to carry in other technologies, and certainly we've seen that Grameen phone in Bangladesh, where Grameen phone going in with cell phones into the rural areas tended to result in power in the areas, because once they had a phone and were starting to use it, then they wanted reliable power. And so I think there is an opportunity there for online communities and virtual worlds to be an infection vector through cell phones. But I don't necessarily think that there is a killer version of that yet, at least not to the degree that you might see other online technologies that you'd want to carry in on a cell phone. So access to Wikipedia or access to, education and learning.
I think we have time for one last question, and this comes from Victoria, British Columbia in Canada. What can one person do to continue the growth of nonprofits in Second Life? What can a single person do?
So sorry, I missed who that was going to, because you actually cut out for just a moment.
I actually am addressing it to both of you. It's our last question from the audience, and it's probably an appropriate one in terms of someone asking, what can an individual person do to promote?
Sure. So I think that much like online, the great thing about virtual worlds is that you can do. Right. Find out where your interests intersect, something you enjoy doing, and start doing it in Second Life. Start doing it online. Start, build a community around something you're interested in, or participate in an existing one. Right. Again, it's much harder to create from nothing compared to additively improving something else. And so, find out how to come volunteer on MacArthur Island, or, volunteer somewhere else, or find an idea in Second Life that should be shared with your local school. And I think, that's one of the great powers of both Second Life and online, is that you have this incredible opportunity to take an idea and really run with it in a lot of different ways.
I think if you have a passion and you come to the nonprofit commons, you'll either find an organization that you can connect with, or you can find others who would want to join with you to form an organization, whether in Second Life or in the physical world. But I think this is the great advantage of this medium, is that an individual can make a difference.
Thank you. Well, it looks like we are just about out of time. I want to thank Jonathan Fanton and Cory Ondrejka for a terrific and thought-provoking discussion, and to the audience for joining us today. We're now going to transition to the reception area. So those of you that would like to talk with Jonathan or Cory, you'll be able to find them out in the reception area. And last, I'd like to thank USC's Network Culture Project and Doug Thomas, and a big thanks to Global Kids, with a special thanks to Barry Joseph, Rick Panguniben, Tabitha Side, Joyce Bellencourt. And also at MacArthur, I'd like to thank Benjamin Stokes, Craig Wacker, and Sharon Burns and her team for helping us put this event together. I look forward to seeing you all in the reception area.
And Connie, if anybody wants to carry on the conversation beyond what we can do in the reception, they're certainly free to email me.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you
Great,
all.
thank you.
Thanks, Cory.
Thank you, Jonathan. This was great.